So, hello and welcome to another episode of Grief Unedited. This is a space where we have honest, real, and raw conversations about grief and loss. I'm your host, Karen Lafferty, and I'm an accredited counsellor specialising in grief. And I've worked with people for over a decade now, helping them to navigate their journey of loss. If you want to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and both of those are at Continuum Counselling, or my website is www.continuumcounselling.com. Now, I always start the episodes by saying that the podcast is purely for educational purposes, and any views that are expressed in it are my own, and they're not representative of any of the third parties that I work on behalf of or alongside. And I always do give a bit of a content warning before I dive into the episode, just to acknowledge that the conversations that we have are very real, they are completely unedited, so please use your discretion if there is anything in today's episode that you find difficult or triggering in any way. We know that grief can be really overwhelming at times, so please do listen to your own wisdom as to what you're finding helpful at the moment or not. Now, today's episode is a wee bit different to our normal episodes in that my guest Nikki has got quite an interest. I'm saying quite an interesting. Nikki's got a very interesting backstory and is going to be sharing a bit of that with us today. But Nikki, can I get you just to introduce yourself first and yeah, tell us who you are?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Karen. So my name's Nikki. I live in Cambridgeshire in England, and I also live in Spain. So I split my life between two countries, and there's a reason for that, which will no doubt come out in our conversation later on. And I was widowed 12 years ago at the age of 48 from my life and business partner. So we were together for 24 years. And at the same time, I faced my own mortality as well. And so when we talk about grief, there's a lot wrapped around that with my journey, because I'm obviously grieving or have grieved for the loss of my partner, but there's also a lot of loss from my point of view when I was unwell. So I have two, they're not children, I have two adults. I have a 30-year-old daughter who lives in London. She was just nudging 17 when her dad died. And I have a 28-year-old son who lives around the corner from me because he couldn't be far away from his mummy. And he was 14 when his dad passed away. So we've had to navigate that as well. And as a business, I sort of started off as a business strategist and mentor. But with everything that happened to me, I've kind of now weave life architecture into everything I do. And that's about really living life for today, being grateful for when you wake up in the morning, and making sure that the life you are living is designed by you, not by anybody else, so that you're not living a default life. It's very easy to be on the hamster wheel, and it's often too late to get off. So I'm a great one for encouraging people to get off the hamster wheel and really live each day.
Oh, amen to that. Yep. And to the best of my knowledge, I was thinking before we come on today, Nikki, that to the best of my knowledge, I don't think any of my guests so far have been in this really unique position that you've been in that you really were face to face with your own mortality. So take us back if that feels okay, and kind of set the scene of what was going on. So obviously we've talked a wee bit about your partner's death. So yeah, tell us a wee bit about what life was looking like at that time.
Okay, so it was December 2010. My partner had some surgery for rotator cuff injury that he'd had from a holiday. And as he was in recovery and I was looking at him, I noticed he had a lump on his neck. And I said to him, "Oh, you've got a lump." And he thought, "It's probably from the surgery. Don't worry about it. It will be fine." But the consultant who did the surgery came in and said, "Oh, we found a lump on your neck. We're going to get that looked at." And that was really the start of the year from hell. So that was December 2010. And all over Christmas, we were waiting for the biopsy results from his lump. And then in January 2011, we got an appointment for what's called the Woodlands Centre in Cambridge, and straight away I knew he had cancer because that's the cancer centre.
Okay. And
he was in complete denial. He didn't think that was what he was going there for. God knows what he thought he was going there for, but that's when we were told he had a very rare blood cancer called mantle cell lymphoma. So it's treatable but not curable. The best outcome could be a stem cell transplant, and that could potentially get you 10, 15, 20 years. So that's what we were aiming for, and that was the start of our journey. And then in the February, my mum got diagnosed with womb cancer. And I think she must have been, I don't know how old she would have been at the time, maybe in her 70s. And then in the March, my dad had something called trauma onset psychosis. And I think that was a combination of his best friend dying at Christmas, and then his son-in-law getting diagnosed in January, and then his wife. And he just went completely mad. And that's a whole other story, how psychosis affects the brain. And he was imagining all sorts of stuff, which led to me basically managing 3 people's health requirements. I was their advocate. I dealt with their consultants, looking after 2 teenage children who were splat bang in the middle of exams.
Of course. And
also we'd, in 2010, in the middle of 2010, we'd bought a business out of administration. So we were just in the process of trying to put that business back on its feet and scaling it. So I had quite a lot on my plate for quite a period of time. And you just get into that rhythm, don't you, of hospital appointments, you know, where am I going to be today? Who's got what, who's doing what? There was a memorable day in May. I'll never forget it. It was just the worst day of my life when I had to drop my partner off in Cambridge for his cancer treatment. So I dropped him off, got in the car. My mum and dad live in Essex. So then I drove an hour and a quarter to Essex to my mum's house. Quick cup of tea, put her in the car, then drove her to Ipswich, another hour and a quarter, to see the womb cancer consultant, saw him, got her date booked for her surgery, got all that sorted out, drove back to Essex, had another cup of tea and a sandwich, and then put my dad in the car and drove him to a hospital in Essex for his psychosis assessment. Took him back home, had another cup of tea, drove back to Cambridge, picked my partner up at, I think, just after 6 o'clock. So, you know, I'd started at 7 o'clock in the morning, got back at 6 o'clock at night, took him home, put him to bed, fed the kids, went into the field behind my house and screamed because I was just so angry, just angry with everybody. It was like 1 would have been bad enough, 2 is unfortunate, 3 is just, this is ridiculous, how, you know, after everything else. And that was how my life then went for months and months and months. My mum had her surgery, she fully recovered, fantastic. The drugs worked for my dad, and by Christmas he was pretty much back to normal. And also by Christmas, Colin was in a really good partial remission, so 90% recovered. So things were beginning to look up, and we went off for a skiing holiday for Christmas. He felt well enough to go. Brilliant skier, that was his thing. So we went skiing. Our best friends arrived on Christmas Eve to surprise us. Wow. But I really struggled that holiday. I really struggled. If I showed you a photograph of me that year, I probably looked about 90. My hair had been falling out in handfuls. It had to be cut really short. I was gaunt. I probably didn't weigh more than about 7 stone, even then, maybe 7.5. And I really struggled to ski. I was really struggling. Just thought I was tired. Anyway, we arrived back in England. It was January 2012. And I knew Colin's cancer had come back. I could hear it on his chest. So obviously phoned his consultant, said, you know, it's back. And the consultant and I were really good friends, and we were on first name terms. And he said, Nikki, there is no way it will have come back that quick. And I said, with respect, you don't sleep with him. I have my head on his chest. I can hear it. I can actually hear it. And so he humoured me. We had a CT scan, and sure enough, the cancer was back. So we were back on that whole treadmill.
Yeah.
And on Valentine's Day 2012, back onto the dropping him off to have his platelets. So I dropped him off to have his platelets. And as I was leaving the hospital, one of his nurses came up to me and she said, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, fine, I'm fine." And she said, "You're not." She said, "You're not okay." And I said, "Well, I'm just a bit tired." And she said, "Your lips are turning blue. I can see your lips are blue." And I had been struggling a bit with my breathing. I'd been out, I think I'd at the weekend, and I've been cycling back. It was my one night out, and I'd been cycling back from a friend's, and I'd struggled to get up the hill. So I knew there was something going on. And so she said to me, "I really want you to go and see your GP, because if you don't go and see your GP, I'm going to whiz you down to A&E." And I thought, well, I don't want to go to A&E because I haven't got time. I haven't got time to go to an A&E. I'll just go and see my GP. And as luck would have it, my GP wasn't there that day. So I saw a locum. And I think that locum was probably instrumental in saving my life.
Gosh.
Because he treated me as a person, not as the carer of a sick person. So he took me at face value. He didn't know what had been going on. Yeah. So he did all the tests, and I walked back into his office. I just had an ECG or something done. And I walked back into his office, and he was on the phone saying, "Yes, we need an ambulance." And I said to him in all seriousness, "You're really busy, I'll come back."
Oh, wow. So
And
you
he
had no
said, "No,
awareness that was...
it's for you."
Mm.
And I said, "No, I can't get an ambulance. I've got to do this. I've got to do that." And I said, "Look, I will go, but I need an hour. I need an hour and a half just to sort everything out." And so he said, "Well, you just sort it out." So I made some phone calls, got the kids picked up from school, arranged for someone else to go and pick my partner up from hospital, and got myself to A&E in Hinchinbrook. And
So Nikki, you had no sense at all of how unwell you really were at that point? No?
No clue. It wasn't till about 2 hours later. So I was in the medical assessment unit, and they wheeled me down to X-ray in a wheelchair. I was perfectly capable of walking, but no, they wheeled me down. And I was standing in front of the chest X-ray machine, having the chest X-ray done. And I could see at the corner of my eye, first of all, there was one radiographer, then there was two, then there were three, all looking at the screen. I thought, "Oh, this doesn't look good,"
Dear.
three of them. And it was this look that this person gave me when they went to put me back in the wheelchair. And I thought, "There's something you're not telling me. I know there's something quite wrong here." And then I was admitted onto the respiratory ward. And I didn't actually see my partner again for nearly 3 weeks, because he was too ill to come and visit me. He couldn't come into hospital because he couldn't get any infection. So that was on the Tuesday. And then by the Friday, my oxygen level was so low, it was like my SATs was 60% on 5 litres of oxygen. And luckily, one of my girlfriends is or was a resus officer. She just happened to come and see me. She knew I was in the hospital, and she thought, "I'll just pop in and see Nikki." She took one look at me, one look at my oxygen level, one look at everything else. And before I knew where I was, the button had been pressed. And she is literally running down the corridor with a ward orderly, getting me into intensive care.
Gosh.
So the last thing I remember was saying to the doctor or whoever it was, he was saying, "Don't worry, Nikki, we've got you. We're going to look after you." And I was saying, "Don't knock me out. Please don't knock me out. Please don't knock me out." And he was going, "We're going to have to." And I said, "I haven't seen Colin. I haven't seen," and that was it. Gone. So they intubated me. And there was definitely, it was my lungs, and I had pneumonia, multiple infections on top of my lungs. So apparently, if you'd looked at my X-ray, instead of the unusual shape of lungs, they looked like two solid bruise blocks. They were square. There was so much infection on them.
So that's what everyone was seeing when they were looking at the
they were seeing like, "These lungs aren't working. This woman is like really sick." and that's what they were all seeing. So allegedly, yeah, I was there for 2 nights, and then apparently on the Sunday evening, they rang my partner and they said, she's really, really sick, like properly sick now. If we don't move her tonight, she's going to die. But if we do move her, there is a chance we can help her. And bearing in mind, this was 12 years ago, the ECMO machine that they were trying to get me on is the machine that they now use for all the COVID patients. Do you remember when COVID happened and you'd see pictures of people on this machine, and it was a complete lung bypass, or they face down, prone, giving their lungs a chance to recovery? Well, back then there were only 6 ECMO machines in the country, and I was just very lucky that I lived on top of Patworth Hospital. And not only did I live on top of Patworth Hospital, but they had one machine that had become free. So I was just right place, right time. And they sent the ECMO retrieval team to collect me, knowing full well that I might not even survive the journey. They got me to Patworth, and then I was put into a medically induced coma on ECMO, basically to give my lungs a chance to recover. And then it was just literally a waiting game. And they said to Colin at the time, they said, look, she's so ill, we're just pumping her full of every antibiotic we've got. And it's like shooting satellites from the sky. We're not sure whether we're going to hit the right one, but we're just going to keep doing it. So that was on the Monday morning. And then on the Monday evening, my neighbour, who happened to be an intensive care nurse at Patworth, came and knocked on the door and said to Colin, when are you bringing the children in to see Nikki? And he said, well, I thought I'd bring them in tomorrow night. And she said, you're going to have to bring them in the morning because she's probably not going to be here tomorrow night. So he had to wake the kids up and say, you need to go and see mum in the morning because she's really, basically he brought them in to say goodbye to me. And so they came in and said goodbye. So that was that. And then they just waited and waited and waited. My sister-in-law moved in to look after Colin and the kids because he couldn't be battling cancer and looking after them and doing everything else that he had to do. And they waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. And, my neighbours were vigiling, and it was just literally up and down for days. Some days they were thinking, I was holding my own. Other days I did actually die at one point. And then after about just over 2 weeks, something like that, they said that they would be happy to lift the sedation. And the exact words they used were, we'll see what we've got left.
Oh, gosh, wow.
And that meant they didn't really know how much oxygen I'd been deprived of. They had no clue because I had been so poorly. They told him that I would be in rehab for 6 months. I probably wouldn't be able to talk, definitely wouldn't be able to walk, all the other things that, we take for granted. But at the end of the day, they had no choice because he was really quite ill at this point. He'd been refusing to have his chemotherapy because he had to go into hospital for 4 days at a time for his chemotherapy, and he didn't want to leave the kids. So they were just giving him oral chemo just to keep on top of it, but it wasn't really strong enough. It wasn't good enough. Anyway, they took me out of the coma. I came round quite groggy, a bit of a sore throat from having the tube down my neck. And I said to him, what are you doing here? You should be having your chemo.
What are you doing here? He's like, well.
Yeah, well, and actually, he said to the consultant, she's back, she's fine. But I was still in critical care, and sort of my sister-in-law was really good because she kept a diary of that time. So she, and it's really sad to read it actually because it's scraps of paper, and she was going to type it up neatly and she never got round to it. So it's like, day 5 you're holding your own, day 7 Colin hasn't stopped crying all day, he can't believe, and she used to say things like, he loves you so much. And that was really lovely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, came out of the coma, was in critical care for a few days. Then I was working my way down the wards, and like in the back of my mind, I knew I was getting better, because every time they moved me, I was like, you know, and when they moved me from Patworth to Addenbrooke's, I thought, yeah, I'm getting somewhere now. And I moved from critical care in Patworth to intensive care in Patworth to intensive care in Addenbrooke's, and then I started to go through the wards. But this is the thing about grief and everything that happened. So I think I was probably maybe not in intensive care anymore, maybe in high dependency. And I was in intensive care because one of the nurses said to me, I was a bit more lucid, and she said, how are you feeling? And I said, do you know, I am so tired. And she said, really? I said, yeah, I am exhausted. I said, I have not slept for weeks. And she was the one that actually broke it to me that I'd been asleep for quite a while. And she said, actually, you have? I went, no, I've been running around. She said, no, you've been in a coma. You've been out of this world for a little while. And then I started to have these memories about my mum came to visit me, because I kept everyone at a distance for a while after I came out of the coma. It was almost like I needed to process what had happened.
Yeah.
And I didn't, you know, you'd think the first person you'd want to see is your mum. I didn't want to see anybody. My kids didn't want to come and see me, because I had lots of lines in my neck, and I looked like Frankenstein. I had blood, you know, I had tubes, and it was just horrible. So my kids didn't want to come, and I didn't want them to come. I phoned them, but I didn't want them to come. But I didn't want anyone to come. And when I finally decided one day that I did want my mum to come, and I wanted to bring me cake, because I hated hospital. Well, I couldn't eat it. I'd lost my ability to feed myself. So they'd bring me shepherd's pie, and I'd just throw it over my shoulder. I couldn't put it into my mouth. There was me and this woman sitting opposite each other, laughing at each other, because we were both trying to eat our meal, and it was just here. And in the end, one of the nurses said, would you like a mirror? And I had a mirror, and I was like holding it with two hands, getting it in my mouth. But my mum arrived with the cake, and she said, oh, you know, it's been awful, it's been terrible, and oh, I can't believe it, and we've been to hell and back. And I went, and I said to her, well, I've had a lovely time. And she's looking at me as if I am completely insane. And I said, no, I've been with Nan. I've been with Nanny. I've had a good time. And I can remember a couple of times, like, when I, towards the end of my stay in hospital, so week 6, I managed to get hold of my notes, you know, because they had them at the end of the bed, or they had them on. But I said to one of the ward orderlies, I want my file. And he said, what do you want it for? And I said, I don't know what happened. I said, I have no idea what went on. I need to read it. And so I was reading it, and it sort of said, Nicola was very distressed today. She kept asking for her grandmother and calling out for her grandmother. And I had this really strong feeling that when I was between worlds, she was with me. And there was that soul thing around.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to me, that's so fascinating, because I think often there is that question of like, what actually happens to the mind, you know, where do we go to? And yeah, the vast majority of people don't get to come back and tell us what's happened or what's been around.
I can't really tell you where we go, and I can't tell you for sure I went anywhere, because I can't say for certain that it wasn't drug induced.
Yeah.
You know, because the number of drugs that I mean, bearing in mind I had 17 lines going into my body. I've got 17 scars on my neck. So given that I was literally drugged to the eyeballs and then some, I could have just had the most spaciest trip ever.
Lucid trip, yep.
And you know, that was it. I don't know. So I can't categorically state that this is the case, but I can't discount it either. Because I do remember having this real feeling of peace and being really happy and being really cross when I woke up. really cross, didn't want to be there. And I don't know whether I was really cross because I was going back to the hell that was my life at that time, or whether I was really cross because I'd left what I felt was a really nice place to be.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm never going to be that person that can say categorically, but then I'm never going to be that person that says absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what happened. And then eventually, after much bartering with my consultant around whether I could leave hospital with or without a Zimmer frame and with or without oxygen, I didn't want to leave without oxygen, because when you've not been able to breathe, oxygen becomes really important to you. And he was saying, you can breathe. I'm like, yeah, but maybe I won't be able to. And he goes, you're fine. And I thought, why don't you give me an oxygen tank? And he said, you don't need one. And I said, can I have a Zimmer frame? He said, you don't need that either. You can do it on. So after much negotiation, 7 weeks after I went in, I came out. I weighed 5.5 stone, couldn't wear any clothes. My daughter had to go to BHS, and I think they had a department for teenagers, and bought me a load of teenage clothes, which were just not appropriate, but that's all she could get. And 10 weeks after I came out of hospital, my partner died. So he was literally just going into hospital for a lung drain because he was filling up with fluid and they couldn't drain the lung. It was the Queen Mother's Jubilee weekend, June the 3rd, 2012. And yeah, he went in, and then on the Friday, I turned up. I'd had my phone off all day. I had somebody else, like, just in case of emergencies. And then when I got to the hospital, bearing in mind it was bank holiday weekend, both his consultants and his nurse were waiting for me. I kind of knew that was not going to be a good conversation. And they took me into the room and they just said, the cancer's refractory. We can't do anything more for him. Do you want us to tell him, or will you? And I said, I don't think anyone needs to tell him. I said, I think you need to tell him that you can't treat it right now. And that's all you need to say. You don't need to say anything else. So we went in and we said, like, you know, we can't treat the cancer at the moment and can't get the lung drained. And all he wanted was his lung drained. That's all he wanted, because it was really painful.
Yeah, pain.
And so that weekend, I stayed with him. I went home on the Saturday morning, told the kids that if they wanted to see Dad, they needed to come. And they were incredibly brave. And they just said, we're not coming into hospital because we've never been into hospital to see him. That's not what they did. And if we go now, he will know. So we're going to not come. That was their decision. Whether it was the right decision, I don't know. You know, I know the last time they both saw him, can't say whether that's going to come and hit them around the back of the head at a later date. It might do, it might not. But they decided not to come. So I went back to the hospital. He was getting in and out of consciousness. He had a morphine pump going, and then towards the end on the Sunday afternoon, he just kept saying to me, I need to go somewhere. And I was like, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. And he said, you know, where am I going? And I said, where would you like to go? And he was like, am I going skiing? And I was like, no, you're not going skiing. Am I going fishing? You're not going fishing. But I have to go. I have to go. And yeah, you do. And I just said to him, look, you know, someone's going to come for you and you will know them. And when they come, you need to go with them and you'll be fine. And then he said, are you going to come with me? And I said, I can't come with you because I need to be here for the kids, but I'll see you soon. And half an hour after I said that, he passed away. And it's, yeah. And I think when we talk about grief, everybody else in the hospital was crying apart from me. So I went out, I sat with him for about 10 minutes, and I went out and I went down to the nurse's station, and I just said, you know, Colin's gone. And the nurse, you know, she just burst into tears and she said, oh no, not Colin, not Colin, because he was a really gentle soul and a real kind person, and was so grateful for the care that he received, that all the nurses, all the catering staff, everybody loved him.
So well liked.
So, you know, the two of the nurses came in and they were both sobbing, and I'm thinking, this is really unprofessional. I'm the, you know, but I was kind of okay at that point. And I think I was okay because when we got the diagnosis, I'm not a stupid person. I Googled it, I looked into it, and I pretty much knew that that was going to be the end game. You know, there was nothing short of a miracle was going to save him, although I tried everything I could. So there was a part of me that was just like, oh, thank God it's over. Because I was literally, it nearly killed me.
Yeah.
It killed him and it nearly killed me. And I was on my knees at that point. So for me, the grief didn't come until much, much later. Because I kind of grieved on diagnosis.
Yep.
Then it happened. I was like, oh, so I was right. It did happen. And then I had to put all our lives back together again. You know, the kids, mine, the business that was still on the floor because we hadn't managed to sort it out. And it wasn't till about, I don't know, it was more when some of my friends started doing things and living my life that I saw it. It's like, you know, we had plans for our retirement and my friends retired. I'm like, oh, that should have been me. Or they'd be going off on doing stuff and I'm like, that would be me, that should have been me. Or my daughter's prom, or I didn't expect my son's first suit to be for his dad's funeral. I expected his first suit to be for his prom or something like that. So I think my grief came later, and I was grieving, not necessarily not quite selfishly. I was grieving for my past, my present, and my future.
Yeah.
They all just went.
I think that thing you said though, Nikki, about like that almost relief that comes when you've been alongside somebody, because I'm so conscious and so aware that not only were you alongside Colin in his journey, but you've also had this real close call with death yourself. And it's like, gosh, there was a period of your world for a good 6 months that death must have not felt far from anyone. Do you know, it was just really something that, as a family, and I was so mindful, I suppose, when you were kind of telling the trajectory of everything that happened, Nikki, of like, gosh, what was that like for your kids to, you know, have that conversation of like, you need to go and see mum, to just a few weeks after that, then suddenly having you sitting in front of them to say, actually, you need to go and see dad. Do you know, it's like, gosh, that's a hell of a roller coaster.
My kids have been to hell and back, absolute hell. And my son cannot remember anything about the time I was in hospital.
Wow, nothing.
If I say to him, do you remember coming to see me in the coma? He goes, I blanked it from my mind. He completely blanked it from his mind, because it's too traumatic. It's too traumatic. And it was interesting that they both dealt with it in different ways. Lucy was nudging, 17, 18. She started drinking. She was definitely drinking a lot, going out with her friends, drinking a lot. Had an interesting boyfriend that wouldn't have been my choice, and was doing that whole rebellious sort of two fingers up at the world. My dad died. And she also said something that was really sad. She said, it's okay, and Dan, you still got your best friend. But she'd lost hers.
Yeah.
Because Dad was her best friend. I guess she did have a point. So they dealt with it in very, very different ways. She went off to uni. He stayed at home. He didn't go to uni. He's always been with me. But when we talk about that time now, we don't talk about it very often. But if I make a joke about something, they'll go, that's not even funny. Because I wasn't there, because I was the one that was unconscious, I wasn't there. I didn't see this trauma. I didn't experience it, but, my sister-in-law, my parents could see their grandchildren suffering, my friends could see my children suffering, and I will still make light of it, and they'll go, not even funny, mother, not even funny, we see. we literally came and said goodbye to you.
Yeah.
And then we said goodbye to Dad. And like, yeah. So death was a big part of our lives for quite some time. And I think, you know, what it has given them, the grief and being so close to that, is nothing is ever going to be as bad as that again in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So even when really bad stuff happens, like I had it's flood city at the moment. I had a flood at my house a couple of years ago, and it was pretty bad, and it was really traumatic. And I was really upset. And Lucy goes, "Oh yeah, but no one died, Mum." And then she goes, "Oh no, yeah, died." So anything less than that is nothing. So they have a very much they don't sweat the small stuff, which is it's a horrible way to learn that lesson, but it's a really nice strength to have, that you don't get wound up about all the minutiae that goes wrong in the day. And they do have their moment. I mean, like, I think we all grieve for the fact that when Lucy gets married, it won't be her dad on her wedding day. You know, when the first grandchild comes along, there'll only be a grandma, there won't be a granddad. It's those things. So grief is it's complex, you know, it's very, very complex. And you can be fine for months, even years, and then something will happen and it will trigger it. It's like where I'm staying at the moment. I'm staying at a friend's because I had another flood and my house in Spain is flooded. And we were having lunch on the roof the other day, and there was just, you know, music playing in the background. And then the song came on that I played at Colin's funeral. And it just took me right back there. So although you don't move on, I don't think you ever move on. And you certainly don't move on from that whole who's going to die first thing. You do move forward and you find a way of coping with it, and you try and find a reason for it. So for me, I had to really question why I didn't die. And there's a little survivor's guilt, even though, you know, I had 2 children. Of course, one of us had to survive. But you do go, well, why me? Why didn't he survive? Because I would have done anything to save him. I'd have given anything to save him, including my own life. But so it's very complex. It's really complex. And
I'm curious, Nikki, do you think though, like, because I suppose for the vast majority of people, you know, they've not had to navigate the death of a life partner, full stop, but never mind having to do that in the context of obviously coming as close to death as you did, and also being mum to 2 teenagers in that journey as well. So I'm curious about, like, I suppose in the aftermath of it all, do you feel, is it evident for you that you see life differently now to how you did prior to all of this?
1,000,000%.
Okay.
1,000,000%, yeah. So if we roll back to before it all happened, we had a very big business. I'm talking big business, multi 7-figure business, which had just gone just before that happened. And I'm not saying we're materialistic as such, but we had nice cars on the drive. We had the holidays, you know, the skiing holidays. One year, I think we had 5 holidays in a year. You know, 2 skiing holidays, Disneyland, Spain, and the Caribbean. Ridiculous. You know, we worked really, really hard, but we spent it. You know, that was the way we were. And when after that all happened, and the business that we bought out of administration, I scaled it and then I sold it. And then I sat there and I thought, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not motivated by money. I was never really motivated by money. I was motivated by the life that we could have, freedom it gave us, but that was never the motivation. So yeah, it has. It's definitely, I mean, just the way I live my life. I don't work anywhere near like I used to. You know, if I can get away with doing the bare minimum, I probably would. So for me, everything is about experiences. So if somebody asks me to do something, my default position is it dangerous? Will it kill me? And if I can say no to both of those things, then I will say yes, which means I've experienced some really nice things. You know, when it comes to birthdays and Christmases, don't buy me a gift, take me somewhere, do something with me, share something with me. You know, so I'm very much about making memories. And in my work, I come from a point that we can all be rich beyond money. So that's what I kind of teach, and I teach how, you know, what is your own personal vision of success, what other people say your success should be. So for me, success is, first of all, waking up every day and breathing, big tick box. That's probably as good as my days get. And then the rest of it is, am I living my most authentic self? Am I being true to what's in my heart? And am I putting something back, you know, and helping other people that have been less fortunate than myself? So there's definitely been a shift in that respect. And in the way I parented, that was a massive shift, massive. So I was always quite, you know, we always had very, very strict boundaries. That's good because the children knew exactly where they were. But then, you know, I think Lucy had an 18th birthday not long after I died, and said, "Can I party at the house?" I went, "Yeah."
Wow.
And she was like, "Sorry, what?" I said, "Yeah." Yeah.
What's the conditions?
and she said, "Blimey." And she said, "What about the carpet?" Because I had cream carpet, as we all do, you know, cream, really not cool. I said, "Well, we can get those plastic carpet protector, you know, that blue sticky stuff that you put down." So we'll put blue stuff down and we'll put some rugs on top of it. She was like, "Okay." And she said, "How many can I have?" I said, "How many do you want?" She said, "What, no number?" I said, "Well, you know, we'll be reasonable, but, you know, we can cap it at that." And they were both looking at each other. And then the next day, it was a Sunday, and they were planning the party. Dan was going to be DJing and God knows what else. And they were sitting in the kitchen and they said, "Mum," I went, "Yeah." They said, "We really like this new version of you."
Oh.
And I said, "What do you mean, this new version?" They said, "You don't really care, do you, about anything?" And I said, "Well, I do, but I don't, you know, and if you have a party and someone spills a drink on the carpet can be cleaned. It's a bit inconvenient. It's not ideal, but, you know, it's not the worst thing that's ever going to happen to us, is it?" And what I did as well is, because they pretty much parented themselves for that whole year and a half that their dad was ill, because they could wake up in the morning and we wouldn't be in the house. They'd go to bed and we'd go night, and they'd wake up in the morning and there would be a big, I had this system, I had stickers, I had 2 big stickers, and if they undid their bedroom door and there was a big red cross outside the bedroom door, they knew that we were at hospital.
Okay.
His dad had got a fever in the night and we only had half an hour to get him in, to get him on the antibiotics. So they had to pretty much parent themselves for that year and a half. So afterwards I sat them down and I said, "Right, not going to be your mum or dad anymore, because, like, you know, I don't want to. I want us to be respectful of each other. So we're going to now house share. This is what we're moving into. Imagine it's friends, but, you know, without all the coming and going, but we're going to have our own jobs. This is a diary. I need to know who's in the house. But other than that," and that was really nice, because they needed their friends around them.
Yeah.
Needed to be able to say, "Oh, come and have a sleepover, come and stay." And I said to them, "I don't care if I come downstairs and there's 6 of you around the breakfast table on a Sunday morning. I just need to know who's in the house." And then so we started doing that, and that worked really, really well. That worked really, really well. We had our jobs, we did them, took it into, and yeah, and I think as a family, as a 3, we are super tight. Yeah. We are really, really tight, and the 2 of them, incredibly so. You know, as brothers and sisters go, you couldn't put a piece of paper between them. They're that close. So yeah, I think it's changed me massively. A couple of my girlfriends, one of my closest girlfriends now, I wasn't that friendly with her before Colin died.
Mm.
She didn't like me. She really didn't like me. I know she didn't like me, because I was a different person. I was I had the business and the career and everything else, and then I wasn't. And then she got to know me, and she comes around all the time. And I said to her a few years ago, I said, "You didn't really like me much before Colin died, did you?" She said, "I just thought you were just so busy all the time, and you didn't have time to be a really good friend."
Yeah.
Whereas actually, you're a brilliant friend. But it's that whole, so yeah, I have I changed for the better? Definitely. Do I wish I had to go through that to get that to that point? Absolutely not.
No.
But
I think through your whole story, Nikki, there's been something really powerful about that idea of like the lesson of not sweating the small stuff in life. Do you know, it feels like at each of those challenges, at each of those real pivotal moments along that whole trajectory, there's been moments where you've had to just kind of surrender and go with whatever the flow was in that moment. And I think that's a good reminder to all of us that, we can spend so much time getting caught up in this nonsense of, what we expect and what we think we should be doing and what life's supposed to look like that, absolutely you don't want to have to go through what you've gone through, but, the hindsight you have now looking back on that and, the view that you have looking out into the rest of your life, it's like, gosh, it really has changed your whole
yeah, and I
perspective.
think it just makes you just so grateful for
Mm,
really tiny things.
yeah,
Like, it's when people say, "Oh, I love the little things," I'm like, really? But actually, when you have the possibility of never ever seeing that again,
yeah,
every time you then see it, it's massive. It's a really good thing. And
yeah.
so for me, when like I'm speaking to you from Spain at the moment, and that's where my late partner had bought a house for us to for our retirement. And obviously, when I arrived a couple of weeks ago, it flooded.
Mm,
And that was really sad, because that's our retirement home. That was supposed to be it. But I was talking to someone about it over lunch last week, Dutch lady, and she said, you're surprisingly calm about the fact that your house has been put in a tip. And I went, yeah, well, no one died. No one
mm.
died. And it's still a lovely house, and I can still stand in the garden and look at the mountains. So as long as I can stand in the garden and look at the mountain, it's okay, And
I'm smiling because I'm thinking I can. So I was just thinking I can testify to how calm you were at the time, because I think the first time you and I spoke was the day after you had arrived in Spain, wasn't it? So you'd only
yes,
just recognised
yes,
how
that's
bad it was, and yeah, you were
yeah,
taking it remarkably in your stride, I think.
yeah. And so I think grief is it's. I think there's a piece written by an old man, and I've shared it a few times on my Facebook, and he aligns it to being a ship at sea. And sometimes the waves just wash over you and you feel like you're drowning, and other times you're very, very calm, and you never know when the storm's going to come or when it's
Yeah,
going to hit, but you learn to navigate it. And it's like they say, if you're not terribly sad and you're not really grieving, then you never really loved. And I think
mm,
the grief is only a reflection of the love you had for that person.
yeah,
The greater the grief, probably the greater the love.
yeah,
And so it's a beautiful piece. It's a really beautiful piece of writing, and I quite often send it to people who have lost somebody, because it really does sum it up quite beautifully, that we have to find our own way through. And I think a lot of it is down to just, we don't talk about it enough.
no,
Talk about it.
no,
People don't know how to talk to people who have lost somebody, so they tend to back away. And certainly, what I would say to anyone listening, if you have had a friend that has lost somebody, don't back away from them. Talk about them and ask them how they feel. And don't be scared, because, at the end of the day, we just want you to acknowledge that that person existed, but we're
yeah,
still here and we still need that friendship and that support, and we don't always get it.
I often do training on trying to support people to think about, you know, how to care for people who are grieving, how to understand grief in that kind of third person space of like how do you look after a friend or a family member when they're trying to navigate this. And 99.9% of the time when I ask the question, like what stops you from reaching out to somebody or what are the things that get in the way, the vast majority of the time people always come back and go, I'm worried I say the wrong thing. And every time I have the same conversation of like, you can't say anything that's going to make the situation any worse than it already is for that person. Like, they've lost somebody they've loved. The most catastrophic thing they can imagine has just happened in their world. So if you're a bit clumsy with your words and if you say something that gets a bit muddled, do you know, it's like that is going to pale into insignificance versus what they're dealing with. So just say it, you know, just be clumsy if we need to be clumsy, but say something rather than doing that thing of crossing the roads, turning away, you know, not picking up the phone when they ring.
The worst thing is the people that don't say anything and the people
Yeah.
that turn away. That hurts more than someone saying something clumsy,
Mm,
you know, and I think we just need to be a bit more mindful of that.
yeah. Nikki, thank you for being an incredible guest. I know that your story, will have stopped some people in their tracks because I know for me, the first time I spoke to you, do you know, I think I said wow about 20 times because there was just so many twists and turns that, yeah, if you haven't written a book already, you absolutely should be writing a book because I think your
I am,
stories.
yeah. I mean, there's something coming out which isn't my life story. It's a book that will help people navigating um, the unthinkable.
Mm.
With
Do you
my
want to tell us a bit about that? Because usually when I'm wrapping up our episodes, I do always say if people want to connect with you, like how do they find you and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, launching, it's not out yet, it should be out in June, is something called My Life Manual. And it is a digital download for you, because Karen doesn't come with a manual, Nikki doesn't come with a manual, Dave next door doesn't come with a manual. And if anything happens to you, and I'm not talking about just end of life, but like I did, temporarily exiting your family, this is about the minutiae of life. This isn't about your end of life wishes, although they are in there. This is about the fact that the dog's got diabetes and has to have an injection 3 times a week behind his ear, and you get it from here, there, or wherever. Or, you know, my son's massively sensitive, so you need to cut all the labels out of his underpants. Whatever it is, that is the minutiae of life that nobody writes down, nobody knows about. But my God, if you are not there, it will be horribly wrong. So that's coming out, and that is available as a digital download, and you can then save it. There's loads of ways that we instruct you on how to use it. You have it for life, you update it regularly, and a percentage of all sales will be donated to any number of charities that help people with loss, whatever that loss might be. So that's coming out now. My website is nikkistock.com, but the book is called My Life Manual, and the site is mylifemanual.co.uk. That will be up and live in a couple of weeks' time. And then, yeah, I will. So many people have told me to write a book. I'm not sure that it's going to be that interesting. So
I would buy it.
I'm a bit resistant, but I guess if I go through my life story, when sometimes when I talk about things that have happened, people say to me, "Oh, you should write a book." And you know, I can't remember who they said would star in the film with the book, but I don't know whether it would be a comedy or a drama, but yeah, it might come. It might come. But rather than that, I would rather spend my time raising money and helping people navigate loss, how it comes to them in any way, shape, or form.
Fabulous. And we'll definitely in the show notes for today's episode, we'll put the links to your website and also to your book as well, your digital download as well, so that people can find it. Because I think, again, in the work that I do and the clients that I sit alongside, often we have that conversation of like the things that they didn't know, the stuff that they didn't know where it was stored or the passwords for it. So I'm always a big advocate of like write things down, communicate what you want, what your loved ones want, so that somebody knows what's going on should anything happen.
I've done all the work for you. It's a big
Amazing.
document, and you just take out the bits that you need. So it's easy. Everyone should have one.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Nikki, for your time and your energy in today's episode. And if you're listening and you found today's episode useful, please do consider giving us a like and a share, because that's how the word will spread of this episode. And make sure that you subscribe. That way you get notifications for any upcoming episodes. And all of our show notes will contain links to Nikki's website, to my contact details as well. And yeah, I'll look forward to joining you again for our next episode. And once again, thanks, Nikki.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.